Okay, so now we will enter the part 2 of this lecture 6, where we will understand that how will I generate an operation, or a by operation I mean again like changing a state gate into another state, which is continuous in process. So this kind of process where you start with a state and you go to another state in a continuous manner, like continuous in the sense that both of these are infinite dimension, and it can go to a infinitesimally close to this state, you can go to infinitesimally close to state. So this kind of setup, so the process of this kind of a like vector space plus operator, they form something called a Lie algebra, and mathematically these things are known that this Lie algebra, this kind of Lie algebra, so they form under the framework of the operation, this whole operation, and comes under the framework of Lie group. So anything which has a smooth or continuous manifold, they are construct this Lie under the domain of discussion of Lie algebra and Lie group, and you will see each Lie group or has a generator, and these concepts we will understand all these concepts without going into the mathematical details, purely from the physical point of view. Okay, and later we will of course also learn the mathematical details, maybe in the quantum 2 or something. But let's start discussing this. So I just gave an idea about, if you know already about this is, if you can connect with that. If you don't know, let's try to understand this purely from the physical point of view. We don't need these ideas right now. So what do I want? I want, in this case, what do I want when I say a translation operator? A translation process is basically takes an object here and translate it into there without changing anything else. Okay, so what does it mean in the context of this quantum mechanics? You will have a state gate to start with, that will transfer into another state gate dx, which, and then since both of them are two state gates on the Hilbert space, so there must be a linear operator which takes from here to here. So the translation must be associated with the linear operator. Okay, and this linear operator acting on the initial state, let's say x naught going to like x, or you can say x going to dx. Then this I remove the x naught here because I don't need the x naught if I am using this language. So this one is ambiguous up to an arbitrary unimodular phase factor, that you know always there is a phase factor which you can or cannot write. This is a choice, because at the end of the day for measurements you have to sandwich it with another state, and then that phase factor will go away. But this vector factor will actually not go away if you sandwich with another state and just talk about the probability amplitude, but at the end you will talk about probabilities where this will go away. So now what are the properties you want? How do you construct this operator which will do this job for you? So first property you want, it must be an unitary operator. Why so? Because this is a state, so it must satisfy this. This is also a state, it must satisfy this. So if you put this dx here and here, you will discover it must be d dagger t equal to 1. So d has to be an unitary operator. Okay. What else do you want? You want to assert this statement, that you want to impose this expectation, which comes from very simple physical intuition, that if there is some law of physics or some relation between this operator is true in this region, it is true in this region, it must be true at this region. So it means if I do some experiment and find some relation between the position, momentum, all the measurable quantities, all the observable quantities in your lab, and if I take the exact same data, transfer it into my home in my lab, and I perform the exactly same measurement, same experiment, find we should have the same relation. So the laws of physics or the interrelation between measurable quantities must remain intact and different when it is translated from one place to another. So that is the basic expectation. So that's what it's consolidated here by saying any symbolic relation between the kth bra and the dynamical variable must remain invariant under the displacement of every symbol occurring in it, which means if I have a relation that a position operator x is equal to 2y plus z, something like that. So this, when you go to the state gates and do the measurement, and you go to do a translation for each of them, this relation must remain intact, something like that. Okay. So such an equation will be called like will not change. So that is the point of this. Also the superposition state will remain superposed by the same token. For example, if I have a state which is alpha like some C1 plus Z plus C2 minus Z. So if I do a Stern-Gerlach measurement here, like in your lab, let's say, and then I take that Stern-Gerlach apparatus into my lab at some other place, this superposition should not change. So that is the expectation you have, a normal naive expectation, and that is what you know that this is true. So this kind of relation should not change just by translating the system from one system. But you might ask, why did I get that from? But this is just a basic expectation. It's just saying quantum mechanics is weird, but not that weird. That if I move my apparatus from your lab to my lab, and the experiment completely changes, everything changes, unless you have, usually it changes because when you transfer a equipment from one lab to another lab, you don't replicate the exact same experiment, something changes a little bit. But let's say we do it like absolutely perfectly, nothing changes. So then your whatever your experiment was, it should be the same. So that is why if there was a state was a superposition, it should be also superposition in my lab, a similar superposition. It should not be something else, some other D1 D2. If that happens, then it's a different experiment altogether. You didn't translate it, you did translation plus some other weird thing. Okay, so that these are the two criteria. So based on these criteria, how do I develop, how will I find which operator will represent this process? Okay, what is the structure, what can we say about this operator which represents? So let's say I have a state ket which goes to another state ket because of some observation, and some observable V acts on that, some operator acts on that, it takes him here to here. Now that something happened in your lab. Now I give it a translation and did it in my lab, and when I do this translation, this y goes to dy, x goes to dx, and this v goes to vd. So the operator must be something else because this is a defined vector, this is a defined vector. So vd must be different also. Now we want to find out what is the relation between this v and vd. Okay, so let's write down this vd. This vd is acting on dx, can be written as vd dx because this dx, x to dx is nothing but dx, acting dx, and similarly this is equal to dy. So dy is nothing but d acting on y. So the y can be written, that means y can be written as d, the d dagger d is 1, so d dagger vd x, because if I apply d dagger here, it will give me 1 and it will give me d dagger vd x, and similarly you can write vd as dv d dagger. Okay, so that tells you, this is something we just learned in the last previous lecture, when two operators are related like that, they are called unitarily equivalent. So these two operators which transform goes from takes you from one state to another state in your lab, and the operator which takes you from one state to another state in my lab, and if they are related by a translation symmetry or a translation operation, they are unitarily equivalent. So that means if they are unitarily equivalent, they will have identical spectra and all that. So the measurements will give you identical results. Okay, so the d determines the displacement of dynamical variables as well as the Ket space. So this is how it decides is for the dynamical variable, and this is how it decides for the Ket space. This is how it decides for the Ket space. Okay, now let's proceed further with this argument, and let's see what if this displacement. Now we didn't tell that this, nowhere we assumed anything about the displacement. It is just some translation, taking something from your lab to my lab, which is some finite distance away. But let's say now I said at infinite displacement, which means something you do and by a little bit infinitesimally, almost zero displacement, then you try to develop a formalism for that, try to develop the structure of the d operator. What can you say about that? You can do that, because why you can do that? Because any finite displacement can be thought of made of many tiny infinitesimal displacement. Okay, that you know, so you can think it like that, and because you think it like that, so it is best to think in terms of this small infinitesimal displacement. So any finite displacement from here to here can be thought as many infinitesimal displacement. Okay, so that's what we will eventually come back to this. But let's just think you just removed an apparatus from here to here, like infinitesimally far within your lab, not your lab to my lab. Okay. So x goes to x plus del x, where del x is going to 0, and this is my x, this is my dx. So what can we say about that? So let's say I start thinking, looking into this quantity that is given by dx minus x by del x, where del x is infinitesimally small, del x is going to 0. You can think this is effectively like a derivative. It is strictly not a derivative because you have to understand all these aspects of this, is not strictly defined, but it is something like that. What is a derivative? A derivative is del y del x, where both of like limit del x going to 0. Okay. So this is all something like that. Yeah, but notice this is a vector, this is an operator, and this is well, this is also an operator, but this is a derivative in the operator space. So del x is basically, you can think it as this denominator you can think as s plus del x minus x, and the numerator is dx minus x. Okay. Sorry, I mean to say the other way. You can think the denominator as x as some scalar object which is taking from x to dx, and the denominator as this dx minus x. So if you don't like to think it as, because strictly not a derivative but something like derivative. Okay. So now let's try to understand this object. So the physical continuity tells you if the x is del x is actually equal to 0, by the law of you can apply the limit conditions, that will give you 1. Okay, that should give you 1. So that is just doing nothing, equivalent to doing nothing. So this thing you can write it again, you can take out the d, the operator d, write it as d minus identity by del x acting on this. This is like an operator, this is an operator, this is a scalar, so this whole thing is the operator. So you can just think it as an operator which acts on x to tell you what is the change in x. So now let's try to look into this operator and define, so call it this operator dx, small dx, by assuming this. So now there is an ambiguity in d, it can be multiplied by an arbitrary phase factor without any change, but I want this gamma to be 0, because I want when the del x going to 0, this becomes identity, not identity times some ambiguous phase, then it becomes some problem. So if it is not, when I go to x plus dx, when I change this dx back to 0, I should return here, I should not return somewhere else in the complex vector space. If this gamma is something arbitrary, then this gamma can lead to somewhere ambiguous. So I lock down this gamma. It can be anything, but I choose to lock it down to be 0. Okay. So setting gamma equal to 0. So now my d is basically 1 plus dx del x. Okay. So this dx is d suffix x. So this is like a vector. This is like an operator. So this is still an operator, this is an operator, this is an identity operator, and this is a scalar. Okay, so that is what I can say about the structure of this operator for an infinitesimal translation. But now I want to find what is the condition of dx, given that this d dagger d is equal to 1. So d is unitary. What can I say about this structure dx? So if I impose this and I neglect the term which is ordered del x square, which I can do because del x is very small, I find that it is dx dagger is equal to minus dx. So it tells me if d is an unitary operator which gives you an infinitesimal translation, then one should be able to write it as 1 plus dx del x, where dx satisfies this property that dx dagger is equal to minus dx. So that is basically this dx must be anti-Hermitian, or it must have purely imaginary eigenvalues, where dx dagger is equal to dx is Hermitian, and that will have purely real eigenvalue, this will have purely imaginary eigenvalue. So now for every dynamical variable, every dynamical operator which can take you from one state to another state, there must be a v and a corresponding d. So there must be a v and a dx. So what is the relation between these v and dx? We have realized that the vd and v are related like that. So let's try to apply this dx idea into that. So this is dx dagger d, so this is dv d dagger, so dv d dagger. So d dagger is, since this is anti-Hermitian, this d dagger is equal to minus d, so I write it as minus d. So then I put in the expand this, and I will get, again my rule is to neglect anything that is order delta x square or bigger. Okay, neglect anything or okay, I mean to say not bigger, I mean to say smaller, because a delta x is smaller. So when I do that, I obtain this, and then again if I construct this kind of a structure, that what is Vd minus V by del x tells you, I get something called dxv minus v dx. Now notice dx is an operator, v is an operator, or both of them you can think they are matrices in the Hilbert space. So they form, we find a relation like that which tells me what is the difference between Vd and V. So we know if the del x, so now we want to make sense of this idea. So okay, so now let's try to see a very specific scenario which is related to this. So suppose we have an apparatus which measure x. Okay, now if it to be displaced del x on del axis, it will measure xd x minus del x or x plus del x. So that means now my v is x and vd is x minus del x. Okay, so then I that gives me the following. So x plus dx minus x by del x gives me minus 1. So in this operator, so if v is x, so that tells me this x and x operator and this dx operator, they form a relation like this. This is a very important relation. We know what this kind of relation is called. This is a commutator relation that tells you x dx, these two operators must satisfy, this commutator must satisfy something like that. Okay, so now this is an important conclusion. So now we realize that if my operators are like this kind of x and this translation operator, then they must satisfy a commutation relation of this form. Okay, now let's try to understand what is the physical meaning of this dx. So we realize for infinitesimal translation we need an operator d which transforms this to this, that can be written in this form, but d is an anti-Hermitian. And then we realize that if I take a relationship between two operators which does if I take two state states which are related by an operation, then these state states in these two translated frames must be related like this. And then I realize if this operation is basically a position operator which basically does a position shift from x to del x, then this must satisfy a relation like this. Okay, so this much we realize. Now we will try to assign a physical meaning to this dx. Okay, so what is this physical meaning we can attach? So we realize that in order to attach a physical, so dx, so we realize dx is an operator. Okay, dx is an operator because d is 1 plus dx dx del x. So this is an identity operator, identity matrix. So dx also has two operator because this is a scalar and this is an operator which is a matrix also. So but to attach a physical meaning, it has to be Hermitian, but it is not Hermitian, because if it is we just prove that dx dagger must be equal to minus dx, like we proved this. So then how do I attach a physical meaning to dx? It turns out I can write the dx as I dx. I is the imaginary I, the complex I. So then this I dx prime, so then this dx prime can be Hermitian. So now I can attach a physical meaning to this dx prime. So then my dx is I dx prime, and dx is Hermitian. So that could be physical. And if we now follow the structure of this dx in this particular context, you will see that it is eventually represented as some ideal del x. So I will come back to this point again later, but let's try to learn a little bit about what is this kind of how can I specifically attach a physical meaning to this dx in the particular context of position translation. So far we have understood. So one thing is, it turns out this kind of dx, an infinitesimal translation which is generated by this kind of an operator. So let's take a moment to say what does it physically represent. So it represents the d operator is basically 1 plus dx del x. So when the del x goes to 0, then it is an identity. So that projects takes the states x to x because their del x is 0. But if the del x is anything non-zero, then this infinitesimal thing tells you it is 1 plus something else, and this small something else, this operator, is called generator of that translation. So because it is kind of like it is a mathematical word, it's a mathematical meaning, but even by the use of the word generator, the English word generator, you can think it generates translation, because if this would have been 0, then there would have been no translation, the d would have been 0. So that's why it is the generator of translation. So we have learned this thing in classical mechanics already, that how a position translation is generated by momentum, and the generator for position is momentum in classical mechanics, which comes from Noether's theorem, because a translation symmetry tells you some quantity must be conserved, and that conserved quantity is momentum, and the momentum is the generator of translation. If you have not learned already, you will learn it eventually. So let me give you a quick overview of what we need, what ideas we need to borrow from classical mechanics to understand that this dx dagger operator is actually the momentum operator when it's a position translation we are talking about. So here is a quote by Schwinger, which tells you that when we call something like that, a position, a momentum, the only thing we are borrowing is basically names, not the quantity itself, because there is no analogy of what we think as position or momentum is not the same thing in the state, in the vector space, in the Hilbert space, right? They are something completely different object. We are assigning the same name, oh, it's a position state, but it is a completely different meaning. The meaning is completely different when you are talking about a classical position state and a quantum position state. So you must remember that, and that's why this comment is basically emphasizing that. So in classical mechanics, we know that momentum is generator of infinitesimal transition, which comes from Noether's theorem. And here is something you will learn in classical mechanics, or you might have already learned, that you can define these generator functions. So if you have this kind of a transformation, that a QP and PQP. So you start from QP and go to this Q, capital Q and capital P. So what kind of transformation you need? For example, if you want to go, if you start with this Q and your QP is also Q, okay, this is also Q, and if this is P and this Q, this is also P, so then the kind of so this is how the generating functions are defined. So generating function could be something like this, or something like this, something like this. This is all from Goldstein, by the way. Goldstein somewhere page 370 or something approximately that. So these are your generating functions, and you can generate the transformation by taking various derivatives of this generating function, so that you know that if this is how you define your generating function, you get this kind of a transformation. So similarly, if you use something, so these are various forms of generating function to generate different kind of transformation. So now you want to generate a transformation which takes your x to x plus dx. So your x plus dx is your new x, or your in this language is like the q, the capital Q, QP, and this is and it doesn't do anything to the momentum. So that is what we wanted to do, right? Your x will go to x plus dx. So what kind of generating function will generate this kind of a transformation? A generating function which will generate this kind of transformation is this f, that you can check using one of these forms. So let's say if you use this form, you will get this generating function. So that means, so now this form is basically a generating function which does nothing. We know q dot p, the x dot p, does nothing because it takes q to q, p to p. But when you, so this is like an identity. So but when you add it dx times p, or like this, then you generate this kind of a transformation, okay, the x plus dx. So that in that sense, so this object which multiply the dx is momentum. That has to be the momentum, from you know that from classical mechanics. That is why you borrow this thing and you call this dx, which is related to like 1 plus I dx del x. You bring the I here because you want this to be Hermitian, otherwise you cannot attach it to any classical cannot attach it to any measurement. So that is why you call it a momentum. But this and this from here you can start defining how will you call momentum while you discuss about momentum. But this momentum is not anything like the classical momentum because this is an operator in the Hilbert space. So that is why eventually you will call this D, the translation operator, as 1 plus I px dx. But there is one more point to be discussed, is if because you want to identify this generator of translation as momentum, and the momentum means the physical momentum, you have to also match the dimension. It has to be also of the dimension of momentum, but it is not, because this is identity. So this must be inverse length, because this whole thing has to have no dimension, otherwise these dimensions will not match. So this dx actually has a dimension of 1 by length, but then you can put some physical constant here to match the dimension, and what physical constant that should be. So here, so let's match dimension. You want this constant, so this is momentum. So momentum means it has the dimension of ml by t, okay, ml by t, and then this is L, so it must be something like sorry, just a moment, this is momentum, yeah, this is 1 by length, this object is 1 by length, this is ml by t, so this constant has to be ml square by t. So you know which constant in the physical constant from the old quantum theory has this ml square by t dimension. You know this de Broglie wavelength relation, and this h bar is basically p by lambda, and that is ml square by t. So if you plug in that h bar here, and I will tell you a little more discussion later about how this physical constant exactly comes, if you have not done that already in the previous quantum course. So this, if you define your generator of your translation operator as 1 plus a generator of translation, which is a Hermitian operator, I times generator of translation times dx, then to identify this Hermitian operator is something physical, it makes sense to call it momentum from the analogy of classical mechanics. And in order to call it momentum, you have to match the dimension, and this matching of the dimension, for that you divide it by an h bar. So you call your dx as px by h bar, okay, that is how you define it, and that is how this whole thing comes together. Okay, so now that you have called it a momentum, so let me start calling it this. Let me use this relation and plug in the momentum here. So this is my momentum px by h bar, and then I lead to this kind of a commutation relation. So that is the famous commutation relation of x px. So the x operator and the momentum operator, which is a generator of translation in x, and that is related by x px equal to I h bar. And from classical mechanics we know this guy is the momentum, and that's why we call it a momentum. And whenever you call anything like in the classical mechanics name, you remember that fundamental properties, we are borrowing only the names from classical mechanics, because they are completely different looking objects in quantum mechanics. Okay, so now proceeding with this argument, you can show that for any xi pj, it must satisfy this kind of a, so x px will satisfy I h bar, but x py will satisfy 0. They will be commuting with each other. And we know that again from the proof you have done in the previous lecture, you can now take, because if there is a commutation relation, there must be an uncertainty assigned with it, that we got from the Cauchy-Schwarz inequality. So now you can calculate the error in measuring x and y, x and px, and relate it like that, and that leads you to the uncertainty principle. So how this whole thing comes together purely from the picture of Dirac bracket notation, from the need of generating a translation operator in a continuous space using an infinitesimal translation, and to maintain by demanding that it must make certain sanity, and that sanity is like the relation, a physical relation in the or something you measure in your lab must be the same in my lab if you translate it. So that kind of physical requirement gives you this whole structure of commutation relation, and this famous commutation relation of x px equal to I h bar, and the uncertainty relation also. Okay, Now we will like to generate a finite translation starting from this infinite translation. This you have already understood probably, that you can, if you accumulate, you cumulatively by successive accumulation of many infinitesimal translation, you can generate a finite translation. So I call the finite translation dx as capital delta x, where the infinitesimal is small delta. So now how will I go from x to dx? So I do operate this thing many times. So I operate 1 plus I p x by h bar, and I divide, call it the del x, the infinitesimal del x, because this del x is nothing but dividing this whole delta x into n segments, and each segment del x is basically delta x by n, and when n goes to infinity, this becomes a truly infinitesimal. So if I consecutively apply this operator again and again, I can write a to the power n, and this thing is nothing but exponential I p x by h bar del x. So that is basically, so you might wonder that what are this, so this exponential of an operator or a matrix, that you will learn in mathematical physics how to strictly do that. But here I can so how this comes to be, this is because when you write it, expand it, so it takes a form like this. So this form can be written as an exponential operator. But this thing is well defined, you can add an operator to an operator and square that operator and all that. If you can define such a thing, then you can call it an exponential of an operator. Okay. So that is generates a finite translation. So now I will do a little bit of sanity check, and this sanity check is basically the kind of relationship we expect between the x, between the various translation, various direction and all that, to see all the framework we have just developed, whether it fits with this picture. Okay. So we expect that successive translation in different direction will commute. That means, and that is a very common sense, because if you translate in, if you go from, first go in y direction, then go in x direction and reach from the point a to d, like let me call it a to b, and this is the d. You go a to b via d, or you go to do first x and then y, you still reach at the same state. So these two operations consecutive applied, if you have an operator x and operator y, or you do a first an operator y and operator x, they should land you to the same state. That means they must commute. So that if, and commute means the states might be, the position states must be simultaneous eigenstates of operators which take you different direction. That we already developed this idea differently in the previous section by saying, because you can simultaneously measure it, and now we will land on the commutation relations for that. So here I must, if I do first y translation, so I write it as delta y with in y cap, to remind me it's in y cap direction, delta x in x cap direction. It should give me the same as delta x x cap plus delta y prime y cap. It must give me same as this, and it should be the same when I do first x and then y. Okay. So how to write it down? So I know that d operator is nothing but this exponential. So if I write it down, this d operator, and expand it and like just keep the terms which are ordered like at least delta x delta y, so I will reach to this. But these two must commute, because these two are the same thing. So that's why this commutator must be equal to 0, and that tells me their generator, which means the momentums, must have the same commutator relation. Okay. So this is the commutation relation it must satisfy, and that can be generalized to pi pj equal to 0. So px py pj will also have simultaneous eigenstates, just like x y z in different direction, that is like that, and so on. And from that means, when that is true, then you can say that if I have apply this d operator, which dx prime operator, which takes you x to x plus d prime, if I add this operator on this eigenstate px prime, I must get something like that. So this must be an eigenstate of d dx prime also. Otherwise this, because that's what we established, that otherwise this kind of relation is not possible. So this thing overall tells me that this p dx prime, this d dx prime, overall these two operators must commute. Okay. Okay, so if you have a little difficulty with that, just write it down. It like, look, this identity must give you identity, but this p on this eigengate must give you also the px prime, the number p prime. So that is why you are saying, oh, this p is an eigengate of p, and this p is also an eigengate of ddx. So this must be a simultaneous eigengate. So they must hold this kind of a relationship. Okay. So ddx has no, that's why. But notice one important thing, that p is a physical observable, like d, even though x, p are all physical observable, that's why we wanted to make them Hermitian. This guy, this operator is not necessarily Hermitian. So this d operator is not necessarily Hermitian. So the something which generates the translation is not necessarily Hermitian. So that's why it can have a complex eigenvalue. So even though they have simultaneous eigengates, their eigenvalues could be different. So one is necessarily real because this is Hermitian, and one can be complex because it is not Hermitian, but it is unitary. Even though it's not Hermitian, it's unitary. So this d operator cannot be associated with anything physical, any physical measurement, but this can be associated with the physical measurement, which is x and p. Okay. So now we are we come to consolidate all the relations we learned, which is the relation between all these commutator. We learned how to get that starting from the Dirac bracket notation based on some physical intuition with minimum possible experimental inputs. We developed it as much as possible mathematically rigorously. Of course, there are some assumptions to be made, but it is very important that you clearly understand the distinction between where we are using our imagination or stretching the, something which is not mathematically rigorous, and those are as few as possible it should be, then only this theory will be mathematically elegant. But that is not the only criteria of a theory, of course. Even if it is mathematically beautiful and elegant, it may not be useful in describing a physical system. That's what we will learn next, that how useful is this thing in describing physical system. But we have realized that how this common well-known canonical, these are called together canonical quantization, or the rule of the kind of operators, what kind of relation the operators must follow when they are position and momentum operator. And again, you must remember that when I say position and momentum, I am just borrowing the names from classical mechanics because they are nothing like the classical mechanics object. When measured, then you of course generate something which is like classical, it's a real number, but at this operator form they are nothing like that. Okay. So this mapping, the visualization of a momentum and position with this position and momentum needs to be done with some care. Now there is a I'll end with a little bit of history. So in 1925, Heisenberg realized that in order to understand this kind of things in like the atomic spectra experiments, he needs to write down the observables in terms of, as a row of numbers. So as a row and column of numbers without knowing what is a matrix. He didn't knew what is a matrix. But then within few months, other physicists, I think Schwinger and Newman, they realized this is actually a matrix. So then they realized, Heisenberg landed with intuition. He discovered a structure which is well known as matrix, which was known as matrix, but that is need not to be. Sometimes the physicist has to invent the mathematics which doesn't exist yet. So you will see that in the context of Feynman path integral and all. But the role of intuition is much more important. That is what it means. And then of course on top of that, you know good mathematics, then you can make sense with the whole thing, which other people did after Heisenberg. Okay, so that's all. So that is basically this lecture 6.